Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on, well, forgotten weapons that look like boxes.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the Shooter's Outpost Museum in Hooksett, New Hampshire, taking a look at a UC-9 submachine gun, which really, in fact, is a registered machine gun and not just a box. Now, this thing dates back to basically the early 1980s, maybe late 1970s, when it was devised by a guy named Utah Connor. Now, there are a couple guns that were developed at the exact same time that look almost identical. The other one of them is the Ares FMG, or folding machine gun. The Ares gun and this gun were in fact developed independently without any mutual knowledge of each other, despite the fact that they're extremely similar in form and design. So we're going to focus on this one today. Eventually later, perhaps we'll get our hands on an Ares FMG and do a video on that. This one comes from, as I said, a guy named Utah Connor, who had the idea to develop a folding, essentially a concealable hidden submachine gun for VIP protection or personal self-defense, or, if I'm going to be honest, probably wanting to be cool with a James Bondy sort of folding submachine gun. And he put together just a couple of prototypes before 1986. And in 1986, of course, the Hughes Amendment was passed in the United States, which closed the registry for new machine guns. And his idea to, design this and sell a bunch of cool machine guns came to an end. However, there is a hitch. Before 1986 happened, he had actually registered, by his account, about 100 receivers for these. They were registered and they were manufactured, which means they all legally existed. But he kind of scrapped his plans to turn it into a commercial enterprise. So at the beginning, these were called the M21, and only a couple of them were manufactured. The one place where this really became recognized or was seen was in 1990 in the movie RoboCop 2, where it shows up as a prop gun. Because as originally designed, this is the modern simplified version. The original ones, the M21s, were made to look like radios, sort of, because, yes, believe it or not, some of you out there, radios used to be large. This used to be a nice, small, compact radio size. What Connor did was he had a carrying handle on top, which conveniently also had sights in it. It was painted sort of a ugly brown 1980s color to look like a leather-covered radio, maybe. Had an extendable antenna. That also used to be a thing, by the way, antennas on radios. And you can see it in RoboCop, where it comes out looking sort of like a radio, and the kid goes whoop, 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 and folds it open and starts shooting with it. So ultimately, only a couple of those get made. The project pretty much stalls. Nothing happens to it. Now, I'm going to open this up. Be aware, a piece is going to fall off. It's supposed to fall off. We'll talk about that more in a moment. Presto, one submachine gun, which on a 25-round mag balances very nicely. So what happens with Connor? Well, he's got at least one or two of his original M21 submachine guns that he still thinks are really cool, and he periodically goes to machine gun shoots to play with them and show off and turn heads. And at one of these, he runs into a guy named Michael Shine. Michael Shine has some money. He runs a company, and the first time he sees one of these things whipped out and unfolded and shooting on the line, he immediately needs to have one. And so he tries to buy one from Connor, and Connor blows him off. Shine would continue periodically for years to try to buy one of them for himself, or to buy the entire project once he finds out that there are about 100 registered, transferable, finished, well, not finished, but manufactured receivers sitting in a shed somewhere of Connor's, waiting to be completed. Connor just kind of blows him off every time in sort of classic cranky old gun guy style. The effect of, Shine's like, hey, I want to buy them. I'll buy them all. I'll finish the project. How hard could it be? It'll be great. And Connor grumpily goes, well, you have no idea what's involved. It's so hard. You could never handle it. They'll never happen. Go away. You bother me. That kind of thing. Well, eventually Connor dies. And when he dies, he gives the, possession, ownership of these receivers transfers to a friend of his. This friend is presumably less crotchety, and Shine approaches this guy with the same deal of, hey, I want to buy the whole project and finish them, and the friend thinks that's a fine idea, and boom, sells the whole works to Michael Shine. Shine puts together a team of buddies who have some experience in firearms manufacture, and they go to work. They figure 6 months tops, we'll have them all ready to go, we'll sell them. What makes this a really viable project for these guys, and this is the 1990s by this point, is that the receivers were all registered pre-1986, so they're fully transferable, which means they have benefited from the significant inflation in machine gun prices, and there's some real money to be made here, potentially. As you might suspect, it takes them a bit longer than 6 months to actually get the guns going, because making guns is actually a lot harder than most people think. But ultimately, they're able to do it. Turns out, by the time they got a hold of the project, there were 76 registered receivers. It's unclear if a couple of those were already built, or if that was 76 just bare receivers ready to go, ready to be built. But they get their hands on a complete original gun that Conard had as a working model to do the rest of their development on, and all the receivers, and presto, they turn it into the UC-9. They have obviously scrapped the handle and the antenna. It's, shall we say, no longer all that useful to try to disguise this as a radio from the 1980s. What's funny is by the time they're selling these in the early 2000s, they start talking about how, like, you could disguise this as a laptop battery or as a external USB hard drive, which is also something that, as of this filming in 2021, an external USB hard drive bears the same relation to this as a radio did to this 20 years ago. Anyway, what we have here essentially is an Uzi. So let me take this thing apart and show you guys how it actually works. So the thing that fell off when I opened up the gun is this, and it appears to be like a cast aluminum, maybe machined aluminum. It's an aluminum end cap for the gun, and it's there because if you don't have an end cap, well, one end of the box is all open and showing all the thing's guts. The other end, by the way, is solid because this is, in effect, the butt plate. A previous owner of this had it stored on a bookshelf, and so he stuck a tag on it saying, "The Holy Bible," in true, proper good humor. All right, there we go. So with the dust cover on, the whole thing is sealed up. And the concept was that in order to open it, all you do is grab at this end, or grab right here, and you start to open this up. And it is going to lever this dust cover off, and it's just going to fall to the ground. That, as originally conceived by Connor, was deliberate. That would provide an audio and visual distraction, clank, from the fact that your box is suddenly turning into a submachine gun. So, in theory, that's a feature, not a bug. Now, once the thing's open, it's actually not that uncomfortable to hold on to, and it is, mechanically speaking, basically an Uzi. So it is a modified Uzi bolt, it is an Uzi grip stick. These things use, there's mag release on the side, just like an Uzi, and these use standard, unchanged, unmodified Uzi magazines, 25 and 32 round. And in fact, a 32 round mag will even fit into the gun all folded up. So by the way that you refold this thing is to reach all the way down in here. There's a little plate with those 2 rivets on it. You push that in, and that unlatches the thing and allows it to fold up. So you can see that that 32 round mag just disappeared in there. Now, Connor was originally inspired by no less than 3 French, naturally, firearm designs. So one of them was the CR39, which has an underfolding stock. It's a MOS 36 variation. One of them is the MAT 49, which has a folding magazine well. And one of them, of course, is the Hotchkiss Universal, which does like a lot of this stuff. Has a folding stock and a folding mag well. And the Hotchkiss Universal also allows you to have a magazine folded up, loaded inside the gun. Note that it is, in fact, totally safe to carry this with the magazine loaded in this way because The barrel is here and the magazine is pointing this way, and as long as the gun is folded, there's no way for it to fire. The bolt has to be closed. It fires from an open bolt. So you have the magazine loaded here, and when you unfold the gun, that's when the magazine locks into place. You can then use the charging handle, which is out here. This is not a hand stop because the muzzle is right there. You do not want to use this as a hand stop. But that is your charging handle, and then you hold the gun back here. There are, of course, no sights on the top, so instead, the charging handle has a little teeny piece of, I think, weaver rail on it, and has been cleverly fitted with a laser. The front of the charging handle has a nice open slot in it, so the laser shines through there, and that is your sighting system. There's our Uzi bolt, fires from an open bolt, and really, this is in effect a very square Uzi, like even more square than a real Uzi, when it's being fired. Now, disassembly took me a moment to figure out without a manual, but it's actually not that difficult. We'll pull the magazine first. And then we want to have the gun partially folded here. There is this right here is on an Uzi, the guide rod for the recoil spring, and it does the same job here, except that the recoil spring has been pushed out the front. And in order to disassemble this, we're going to push the recoil spring in slightly and push out this pin. There we go. That pin comes out, and that unlocks the nose cap. Now, if I push on the bolt assembly from the back, there we go, we can get this block out the front of the receiver. There we go. So this now all starts to kind of fall to pieces. We have the barrel. This is called the barrel bushing at the muzzle. And then this is our charging handle and its return spring because it is non-reciprocating. Now the whole bolt assembly is going to come out the front. In order to do that, I have to pull the trigger to drop the sear, and then I can push the bolt forward. So you have to have the grip mostly unfolded in order to be able to activate the trigger. And there we go. Now you can see what is just basically a slightly modified Uzi bolt. The recoil spring runs in this tube right there. So instead of the bolt compressing the recoil spring backwards, this is being held in the front. This sits in that slot, held in place by this cross pin. And when you fire, the recoil spring is being compressed up in front of the bolt. Where the Uzi has a barrel with a threaded nut on it to lock it into the receiver, of course that doesn't really work here, so instead they have fixed the barrel into this bushing at the front. The charging handle kind of flops around when you're not actually using it. When it is installed, this section nestles nicely into there, and then this hits the bolt to push it rearward. So if we look inside the receiver, we have two sears. You can see them moving right there as I pulled the trigger. That's how the Uzi bolt is held back, so they use two sears on this. However, unlike the Uzi, there is no semi-auto selector. There is a safety lever. If you snap that back, it locks the trigger. Keep it forward, you have full auto and nothing else. When the gun is fully open, we have a spring latch right here that locks over this sort of welded tab on at the middle of the receiver. So that's going to lock it in position, and it's that tab that you have to push down from here to refold the gun. There is also a little catch here, and that's what locks the pistol grip in position. So as the stock folds, this bar pushes that latch back until it unlocks. So you can see we have a tab on the back of the grip, and there's a little notch in there that will lock the grip in the vertical position really quite effectively. And the act of folding the stock unlocks the pistol grip. And then of course the trigger guard here is just on moving pins. The trigger folds forward as well, and that's the whole thing. So the UC-9s originally were put up for sale at a price that was like just a little higher than most people would think would be just a good like, oh, I definitely need to jump on that. They were really trying to maximize the profit potential. I think at this point they've all sold from the original manufacturer, and now they're floating around there on the secondary commercial market because they are still fully transferable machine guns. They're honestly, in my opinion, it's a neat gun, but in no way, like, this is a very specialized gun. There are some people who will talk these up as like the coolest thing ever made. To me, they serve one very specific niche, and that is a cool folding submachine gun. They don't have sights. You could certainly put like a Picatinny rail on here, but then you have a Picatinny rail on what is otherwise an unadorned box, and it makes it stand out a bit more, perhaps. It's not a good general purpose sort of, you know, Johnny's first machine gun kind of thing. It's for people who specifically want something that is foldable, not necessarily super compact. I mean, it is compact, but not like, you can get pretty close to this in something like an M11A1 or a mini Uzi or a micro Uzi. This gives you the very desirable form factor of a rectangular box, though. So anyway, it's an interesting, to me, it's a very interesting exercise in like the unintended side effects of legal issues, in that this became a very valuable commodity where if the machine gun registry had never been closed, these probably wouldn't have been all that popular because people would have been judging them by their actual characteristics, their strengths and their weaknesses. And it's kind of like the submachine gun version of the folding Glock from Ideal Conceal. Was it Ideal Conceal? I think it was. Anyway, the folding Glock that everyone thought was really neat, and then nobody bought because they're like, but why do I actually need a folding Glock? And then the company went out of business. Well, these became substantially more valuable specifically because they were manufactured before '86, but not actually available to the public until well after 1986, when all machine guns had gone up just by virtue of supply and demand. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. It's certainly neat to get a chance to take a look at one of these and pull it apart. Oh, thanks for watching.